Hi. The conversation that you will be witnessing in the next few minutes is the closing of what has been CSJ's Bonds of Hope series, where we have been sharing with you snippets from our restorative processes intervention for children in conflict with law. This series was intended to share with you ways in which we have been working with children within institutions where we offer them a space to connect, reflect, and heal. In this conversation, you will be hearing from two people who played key roles in designing and implementing this intervention, Urvashi Tilak and Aarti Mohan. On a personal note, I wanted to share their voices with you and also bring along the experiences that they carried from this project to share with you the intention and the reflections that they both took with them through this particular project. That's because, as you will hear them share as well, working with restorative circle processes and with children in itself is something that demands the facilitators to be fully present in the process, often causing and also taking from their own self work as people and professionals. I hope that you will find this conversation as enriching as I did. And if you haven't already, make sure to visit our website csjindia.org, where you can find the report documenting this entire project. So now, without further ado, let's hear from Urvashi and Aarti. Thank you, firstly, for agreeing to do this. Now, I think at first I would just like start with thanking you both for doing such a fantastic job. So, just like going through Bonds of Hope and just like listening to the stories that I do at work every day, it's a fantastic process that I see you all doing, because working with children in conflict with law, working with juvenile justice in India, as I think we've discussed in the past, it's a very convoluted understanding that mainstream really has. Like, you look at juveniles, like as people call them, in a very very negative light. It's always seen in a very black and white way, and the fact that they are still children, that's completely removed in most of the larger mainstream conversation. So my question, I think, at first is, what was the intention when you started thinking of designing this intervention with observation homes in Rajasthan? Firstly, like, tell a little about what was the process like, and what was the intention of getting into this space at first. Whoever
Right,
wants to start.
right, right. Thanks, Shivranjana. I'll just add a little bit and then perhaps Aarti can also add in. So I think one of the ideas for CSJ has always been that we take our technical expertise on restorative processes, restorative practices, and reach out to other organizations, train as many people as possible, working in different fields. And like you rightly mentioned, Shivranjana, about children in conflict with law, they are looked at with a certain, there is certain image attached to it. Oh, these children, they must be, and especially if the child is, say, accused of a heinous offense, then the perception is completely different. They are not seen as children anymore. They're seen mostly as monsters. And this has come out so much in conversation with women, with a lot of other age groups also. So what our idea was that if you could reach out more and more to organizations to create those spaces for children, because our work started in observation home in Delhi. And when we went there, initially the idea was that we will start with counseling and maybe explore restorative circle processes, just giving them that space where they could come, do some activities, sit and talk about different things. And that's where we realized that actually informed us much more, because these children, they were referred so much by different sections rather than knowing each other's name. Sometimes the staff would also use terms, maybe call them through sections and not necessarily names. So when we started going to these observations, so we started realizing there was this dearth of space where these children could come in, speak about things which they have been going through, how things have been for them, how the system has been for them, how is their experience been ever since they have come into the system. Children take a lot of time. We have seen very young children coming into the observation home, so that actually encouraged us to reach out more to see if there are possible partnerships which we can do in other states, and at least provide them that rehabilitative space. Because again, if you look at the JJ Act, it talks so much about rehabilitation. So if we can focus on those aspects as well, and even when the children are in institutions, what environment are we providing them? Are they engaging in productive activities at all or not? And that's how the idea sort of shifted. And initially we started with few observation homes, and the idea being that it would be good for the people there, because the nuances and cultural understanding would be different, so they would be able to better conduct the circle processes. So that's why I think we started working with UNICEF and even the Department of Child Rights. They were very supportive, and they have been really great in promoting this. So that is something I think which was really encouraging. Aarti, would you like to add?
Yes, please. Thank you, Rishi, for sharing that. Yeah, I think additionally also when we started our circles, the idea was just to create a safe space for these children, like what Rishi was saying, right? That the experience inside the institutions can often be very hard. So we wanted to create this safe space where they just have a space to be heard without judgment and shame. So what Rishi was saying, there's so much of shaming that may happen or name calling that may happen. We just wanted one safe space, and that's how the circle started earlier in Delhi. And then we started designing the circles based on the needs of the children. So when they wanted to talk about something like consent, we had processes around that. So when we designed the Rajasthan project, we had gone in with these certain themes for the circles we wanted to do, and we had thought of different concerns that children might have been affected by. We also spoke with them there and the facilitators who were doing the circles to understand the themes better. So, for instance, we've done something on anger, because anger is something a lot of young boys experience, and understanding what anger is, what are the underlying emotions, how do we really deal with that. One other thing we've done which really comes to mind is gender. So we've seen the need for young boys to talk about gender stereotypes, and based on that we did these processes where we just spoke about what do you think gender stereotypes are, and we gave them these pictures of different professions, and we asked them which one do you think males can do and which one do you think females can do, and then they colored them. And eventually when the discussion started, so the idea in a circle that we won't teach them, or we are not going to really tell them what's wrong or right, but in the discussion they themselves started saying no, but anyone can do anything. So it's a very self-led, self-facilitated discussion, and that was our idea when we were designing the spaces as well.
Right. Thank you. So I think what I heard when I was listening to both of you was this aspect of also needing to look at children who are within observation homes as children in need of care and protection. So would you maybe like add a comment on that? Like because I heard that a lot of the process of designing the intervention was focused on an idea to explore really, not go in with this position of power also in a way that saying that we know what's good for you so we'll tell you what to do, but it's also approaching the process with this understanding and openness of learning that you are an individual. You might be a child, but you are an individual with your own needs, and we want to help you. We want to create a space for those needs. So, talk to me a little about that process of discovery when you started with the intervention.
Aarti, perhaps you can add in there.
Sure, sure. Yeah, like you said, the main idea for us was to create a safe space, and it was not just about teaching or doing anything else, but to create that safe space. So when we went in, we were trying to meet the children where they were at, whatever their needs. So a lot of them, for example, were dealing with mental health difficulties. So we tried to meet them where they are at by linking them to appropriate services or people who could help them, but also knowing that then just there's a lot of value coming together, being heard, creating support amongst each other. And our idea was just to create some discussion prompts or some activities where they get a break from their daily routine. Also, often we saw that they did not have a lot going on for them during the day. So we wanted to give them a little break from that, have some activities, have some fun. We didn't always want it to be very serious conversation. We saw value in just being as well and just having fun as well. A lot of our circles did involve that. And then apart from that, when we would ask them things and if they would want to talk about specific things, we often created space for that. So I remember in one circle where we had spoken about, where one boy had spoken about having suicidal thoughts. After that, we had some discussion in the circle itself around that. So it was a process of just having a plan in mind, a broader plan, but then meeting children where they were at.
Okay. Thank you. Um, Urvashi, would you
Yeah,
like to add
yeah.
something?
Yeah. In fact, I was just thinking about this one time where one of the facilitators was actually sitting with children in one observation home, and there, maybe because of space or a lot of other issues, there was this one child who did not necessarily communicate a lot. But he would still love to be involved in the circle process. He wouldn't necessarily participate so much. But the facilitator, what they did was they allowed that space, and this child would feel really nice just sitting there listening to everybody and maybe just coloring, you know. And as the circle processes went on for months, there afterwards, this child became very comfortable, and I think he shared, and just the fact, just seeing value, like you mentioned, the fact that as facilitators to know, make sure that you are not exercising your power, but also making the space very inclusive, making sure that you are, because the minute the facilitator did that, that it's okay for the child to sit, even if he's not sharing, even if he's not speaking, if he just feels that this is one place where he can just sit and be, you know accepting that itself is huge. And that is the culture which you are also inculcating in children. They see this and they model that, so I think that was beautiful. So I just got reminded of that. And also I realized, there were times when the children, I think, wanted to create different talking pieces. So I think that also was really encouraging. And I think just the fact that there are times when a lot of these topics come from children, just the fact that they want to have discussion on certain things, I think that itself shows that they have this agency to speak about things, and also encouraging them to ask questions, what the process looks like, just exploring those, and maybe exploring that later on when they move on with their families, so I think that's where I see the value.
Thank you. So another follow up on that, because I was just like just listening and thinking that two things that I feel are important or that come off this intervention, especially, is one, the idea of perception and the importance of perception shift. Of course, that's something that we began this conversation with. The other is also the time that a process takes, because I'm sure like the intervention happened over months, and I also read in the report of like how one child basically initially would not speak and not feel safe enough, and then when the facilitators modeled behavior of ensuring that the space is also for the child, including the others, then I think it took maybe 5 or 6 circle processes for the child to begin engaging and talking. So tell me a little bit about restorative processes and this idea of how process essentially is that it will happen over a period of time, that it will not immediately happen. And how do you, because I think as people who want to see change, we often want things to happen quickly. So even if, and that's where that inner work and understanding of your own personal power as a social worker or somebody in the space, that also comes in, wherein you have to understand sometimes that even if you're going out there to help somebody, they may not take it as help. They may see it as intrusion, or like taking up space or whatever it may be. So how do you like work with that aspect of your work? how do restorative processes work in that arena? Whoever starts,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I'll just add uh, a little bit. So, what I realize, so I think the approach is very different when we talk about restorative processes. Um, I think we do not go with this approach where we say that we would um, we are going with this approach that we know everything. Like Aarti had mentioned initially, we keep it very open in terms of learning equally from children. Yes, we get trained in restorative processes. Yes, you get trained as a facilitator, but it's also understanding, having a very strength based approach also. Also, what Aarti used, meeting people where they are at, right? So somewhere, something which has come out so much in circles generally, every time we sit in circles, is that they have never been asked. Nobody has ever been given that space. So when you speak about children, these children, they have never been asked what they like, what do they like to draw, what do they like to color, what are their interests. Nobody has taken such keen interest, especially when you come into the system. There are these whole series of procedures you are put through. So it's one after the other. Okay, your this FIR is filed. Okay, you're presented in front of the JGBs, and then so on so forth, right? So it's almost like you become part of the system in a way which they don't necessarily understand. And then you're put in an institution away from the family where they're still trying to grasp how to cope with so many things, so many emotions going on. And most of these children, one also has to understand, they do not necessarily are maybe well educated, they have dropped out, and maybe they are also the earning members for the family. So they may not necessarily have the social emotional learning. And I think there were a lot of activities which Aarti and Shipra, they both did with the children in the observation home, where like emotions like anger, when they explode, what do they even feel, and also just understanding, are they feeling anger? Because in the families, culturally, we are not used to speaking so much about emotions. It's always being bottled up. Keep your emotions bottled up. And what we are doing is we are asking children to understand what emotions they are feeling. And it's always so interesting, the emojis you use, the thermometer, barometer which you use to understand the processes. Children are very fast. They're very they understand things and they respond very quickly. It's somewhere it's just that they have never been given this chance to understand their own emotions, to understand where, what they are feeling, what they are doing, why they are feeling a certain way. So when that space is provided, they are able to reflect more. It's not that we go with this preconceived notion that these children will feel a certain way. But I think some of the beautiful activities which Aarti and Shipra did, maybe Aarti can speak a little bit about that, just reflecting on what emotions they are feeling at. Just maybe they are not feeling good that day, maybe because there are days where the parents come to meet the children, right? So there are times when parents are unable to come and meet their children in the institution because of maybe socioeconomic reasons, because of distance, a lot of reasons, and that day perhaps the child is not feeling that great. But is the child able to understand that they are not feeling good because of these reasons? So I think inculcating that, just understanding the emotions, I think is very important. And it's not only with children, I think it's with adults too, because we have never been taught that too from our childhood, right? So that is, I see this as a huge learning process, not only for children but for adults too. But perhaps Aarti can add some more from her work and the circle processes.
Yes, thanks, Urvashi. So, I just love the question you asked because I think that's a very important aspect. Like, is this a quick process or is this a long term thing? And I think that's just a lovely way. So, I think that each process in itself also has a lot of value. Just because we are doing activities, it's a break from whatever we've been doing throughout the day. But at the same time, like Urvashi was saying, the work we've done with the children, the space we've created for them is work that requires a lot of time. It's a very long run process. Like she was talking about just being able to understand what we are feeling, what's going on for us. I remember when we started, how we are doing. That was the prompt. Children would say good, bad. That was the vocabulary. But then as we used our tools and we helped them identify multiple different emotions, that conversation got deeper. But then these are things that do take time because we're also practicing this. We don't want to just teach, we practice all of the tools. So anytime we were practicing any emotional regulation tool, we would do it. We would invite all of the children in the circle to do it, or the facilitators who were doing the circles would do that. So it was like a space that builds with time, and I think that way it does take time. But having said that, going back to what I started with, that each process in itself also has value, because whatever's going on for them, they can share that, or just the fact that they can play games. A lot of our circles had a lot of laughter. It was just laughter around stories or games or activities, and I think that in itself also has a lot of value.
Thank you. Completely agree on that and completely hear you on that, because I think something that I visually was imagining when you were sharing that was the temperature scale that you used as a tool, and how like there's each degree, and to reach to the highest degree you have to start from the lowest step first. So I think just kind of recognizing that is so important. Something that also I came up when I was listening to both of you was around the fact that a lot of these children haven't, I mean, it's not just to categorically speak for or about the children who are in observation homes. I think it's a social thing across different aspects or factors of society in India right now. But a lot of us also have not been raised to understand that, outside of this crime and punishment, right and wrong, black and white, binary thinking, we still, as human beings, have agency. And even like when we look at power structures or hierarchy, which is usually very vertical, and which is also then with children, it's always applied in this aspect of ageism, wherein if you're a child, you have to listen to, or you have to do something for an adult because they're an adult. So that kind of rips off, a lot of that sense of self-esteem and that sense of agency that each person has a right to, just by default of the fact that we've all been born into this world. So I think I just wanted to say that I really appreciate this aspect of the processes that you've done with the children, because um, what I felt when I was reading the report, and what I feel whenever I hear both of you share your stories, is often this idea of reminding them and assuring them that even if the system or the world may have created circumstances and their role in it, or whatever the circumstance may be, maybe they've kind of been made to believe that they don't have an agency, but they do. So I think that, I believe, becomes like a very important aspect of empowering another human being, is to remind them that you have agency still, you can take decisions. So talk to me a little about this value of agency, which I feel is maybe similar to accountability in some ways. Talk to me a little about how that played a role during the processes, during the intervention, and if you want to like share like personal reflections also, in that we can like transition into that aspect of the conversation as well. So yeah, open for listening.
I can start. Yeah, so when you were speaking, I think what really resonated with me was that circle processes are always voluntary, right? So, and that's a little harder to implement, but we always emphasize at the start of a circle, and we work with all of the facilitators to also do that and tell all of the children that when you come into the spaces, it's completely up to you. And I think in an institution, that even that much agency is often missing, and that can be a very big step because everything is so routinized, right from the morning when they wake up to eating and sleeping, etc. So just that space, that option means a lot. And then within the circle also, like everything is completely optional. And especially in Rajasthan, we needed to emphasize that a lot. After every second round, we would be saying it's completely optional if you want to share or not, whether you want to participate in the activity or not. And I think there we were manifesting that sense of agency. Of course, it wasn't always perfectly manifesting because I think there is so much of learned behavior around that in India in general, but then also specifically with the children we were working with. But I think that was a way we were, manifesting that. I'll add more about the personal things after Urvashi shares.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Arti. In fact, I was just thinking about some of the instances, not only in Rajasthan, but generally, when we do circles with children, um, And because they are an institution, like Aarti was mentioning, that there is no agency they feel, right? It's almost like initially people will feel that this is more of a classroom space, so one has to sort of be there. But then, as facilitators, when you model that it's okay, I want to think and maybe pass. For example, I don't want to share. When they see that happening, they see, okay, we are all in the same plane. There is no hierarchy we are creating in the circle space. And with that also, sometimes modeling the fact that equally sharing as facilitators, when we ask a certain question, maybe I'm not feeling well that day, just taking that example, but sharing that. So when I would sit in the circle, I would equally share about say my family, or how my day went, or if I'm asking those questions, sharing that equally with children. And I think children uh, understand that, and they resonate with those values, because they understand that somebody is being honest, and they really appreciate that, instead of perhaps not sharing very genuinely, because just inculcating some of the values which we create in the circle, by modeling those also while we do those, right? So I think just having that space is very important, because sometimes maybe they would be asked to attend a certain circle, but just giving them that agency that they can get up anytime they feel like it, or they can take breaks, or maybe they don't want to speak, maybe that day they don't feel like being part of the circle process, and it's okay. And sometimes it would also have to be reassured that because of being in the institution, right, you're perceived a certain way. And sometimes what would happen is, we would also have some people coming in and observing how the circle process is going and what are the children speaking about. So just by these simple steps, like asking anybody who's sort of wanting to do that, to be part of the circle process, rather than just seeing it as an outsider. Because the minute you do that, the children also feel safe, that they are not being judged, because the space you provide, it's more about creating a space where everybody is equal. And at that point of time, we are sharing equally, we are all at the same plane. So I think it starts slowly from, it's like taking those steps slowly towards a place where children feel that they can come to a place where they can understand what they have done, what acts they have done, whether just to even think whether they were right or wrong, because again, if you look at some of the children who have come, and most of these children, and in fact, when they come into the institution, they have seen violence around them. They have seen gender based harm while growing up. So there is no clear cut boundary as to what is right, what is wrong. A lot of things are blurred. And all of a sudden, if we are telling them that, oh, this is a concept of right and this is wrong, I think it comes from a lot of judgmental space, right? So just maybe understanding those even before jumping to that, maybe just starting very slow, that everybody has agency, and also recognizing just because they have been, they have committed something, because of some harmful activity they have done, they are in the system. That doesn't mean that they do not have value in them. I remember there are times when children are asked what is good about you, they fumble. They don't know what is good about them. They'll speak about others, but they'll not see that need in themselves, that they are capable of something good. So the idea is to also provide them that space to feel that and understand that they are worthy enough, that if they are given those options, if they are given that space, for comfort, for understanding, given that space for reflecting, they are capable of much more, just perhaps that, yeah, Aarti can, we add some reflections also from a circle.
Yes, thank you, Rishi, for that. So, yeah, I'll share a little bit about just personally the reflections from the whole process and implementation. I think one thing was just that circle processes work in any context, and while designing the program or doing it in different places, I think the thought consistently was whether this will work in such a different context, because we had never worked with these children before, etc. In Delhi, we had a significant chaperone from before, and that's when we started doing circles. But these were children we had never worked with before. We were concerned about language barriers, etc., and also just how this would work, because ideally, like, the circle processes we have drawn from are not even Indian. We've drawn them from different. So just seeing that work and seeing how those spaces came to life, I think was something that's a learning that circles really work in different contexts, like multiple contexts. So that was very beautiful that everyone needs a space to be heard, everyone needs a space to be supported. And also the other thing, I think something what Urvashi was saying before and drawing from that, this requires like a lot of us being present as well. So, sharing, but not just sharing, but the whole space also just really taking care of ourselves, our needs, and being very authentic in the circle becomes important. So I think circles are always a reminder to me to practice all of that in my life, even outside of circle spaces. So that's a massive reflection learning for me. Urvashi?
I think you're covered. I think you have. I was just wondering, I somehow, maybe this is not related, but somehow I got reminded of a storyboard. Um, and Aarti, you'd also recall, some children sort of drawing uh, through colors and stories of how they came into the institution or what made them come into the institution. I think those are such beautiful ways of reflection in their own journey, right? And also, what is interesting is they depict anger and also post being released from the institution, what would they do? So it reflects so well of what their plans are, what they want to do post being with the families perhaps. But I think it's really lovely. Some of them also spoke about I think missing their families, and also perhaps understanding uh, maybe consent and the
Mhm.
reason why they are there, which has
Mhm.
become a very, yeah, which has become quite nuanced. Even, in fact, we did one consent workshop also. Not necessarily, we didn't do this in Rajasthan, but in the observation home in Delhi. And that was, I think, captured very well. And also, it made children think about and reflect a lot. I think
Mhm.
just having that space to even have those conversations,
Yeah.
I think it's very important to have that, and somewhere that gets reflected.
Mhm. I think I remember this during one of our conversations. I think you'd shared wherein in the Delhi observation home, there was one child who was saying that, oh, like X or Y is my partner, so I can go kiss them when I want to. But then one of their
Yes,
friends in the
yes,
circle had
yes,
said, no, but
yes.
what about your partner? Do they want to,
Yeah,
be
yeah,
kissed by you or no? Did you
yes,
ask? So that was a
yes.
very like interesting way of
Absolutely,
your peers
absolutely,
holding you accountable and you learning through
absolutely.
that as a process.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I absolutely love that because it's not coming from us. You see, it's coming from the children. It's owning the space, owning the
Yeah.
circle, modeling those values which they come up with. That is what I really love about the circle process, where the children feel that they can share their thoughts and opinion and talk to each other freely in front of these who come.
Mhm,
Right?
mhm.
But I think I just really love that, and it stays with me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, clearly it stayed with me also because I don't remember why we spoke about this, but I remembered this. But
Yes, yes.
I had one more question before I let you both go. It's really about I think um, with any and every intervention that you design, and however great it may go, there are always like some challenges. There are always like some bits of it, and I know that. I mean, in this space of working with children in conflict with law, I'm sure like there's a lot of stuff that we can talk about, and that can go on for days, months, weeks. But what in your opinion, like if I ask you for that one challenge that maybe you faced individually as a professional or organizationally, what was that one challenge that made you really pause, reflect, learn, and then kind of adapt interventions in a way that's probably fed into how you do processes now? So what was that like, if any at all, really?
Oh, no, no, there are challenges. Certainly. I think one thing which I think has stayed, and there are a couple, but just thinking that, when we talk about circle processes, And because with context everything is going to be very different, right? How do you sort of have activities bringing that cultural nuance is very important. And I think some of the facilitators, like some of the activities we planned, they would change that, and bring it to the cultural context. That was very important, because that is something the children will resonate with, something, some rhymes which maybe they grew up with, and some traditions which maybe stays with them. So sometimes that also backfires of how you have conversation with children around that, because um, the place where you have grown up with, or grown up with certain values, how do you have conversations on those things, right? So I think that was a very big learning, also to constantly make sure that our plans have those, right? So now we are very consciously thinking of that, and I think Enfold has brought it up very beautifully in their book on circles also, when they did circles with children. Like they were, when we would go for trainings, we had learned very interesting activities, or energizers, and they contextualized it. And the minute they contextualized it, the response was brilliant, because the children identified with it, so that is something which we are constantly doing and learning from children. We ask them, what is it, something which you played, then sort of incorporating that, because then we are talking about more about ownership, right? So that's how, like, just a few of the things. But again, I think when we do even work or train people, I think that is something which requires a lot of unlearning first, because that has happened with us also. Because when you are working in a certain field, say as social workers, or maybe as restorative practices also, we keep challenging ourselves, and you have to be open to those processes. You have to be open to unlearning, learning new things. So that is a constant process for us. So I think that is one thing which stays with me. And also contextualizing it a lot, wherever we are working with, whether it's with women or children or even men, right? So understanding the vocabulary they are using, what vocabulary are they using, can we use those, can we bring those in, uh, to have, to make maybe connect more with them. Yeah, Aarti, would you like to add?
Yes, thanks for that, Rishi. Yeah, I resonate with the culturally appropriate part a lot. So, we've done a lot of that in our circles. We had our facilitators come in and design a lot of that. And something very closely related to that was also we realized that the children we work with have experienced high levels of trauma. And for that, the circles also need to be adapted to trauma. So we used a lot of trauma-informed practice tools, and we did specific sessions with the facilitators just to how to adapt those in circles. Very small things like just giving options in the circle, or using tools when we have a very heavy discussion. Sometimes we can talk about something very heavy, something difficult, and then just using appropriate tools that we don't cause further harm to anyone. So that was something that we learned along the way. The other thing I think was just the institutional environment. That's a challenge because we go in, or the facilitators go in, do the process, but then when we leave, etc., the children are in that environment where there might be a lot of violence, severe violence, bullying, etc., lack of adequate resources, even. So that is something that remains a challenge. Of course, the facilitators did reach out to appropriate authorities, etc. There were, I think, 2-3 instances where they made a very tangible impact as well. One child who had mental health difficulties. In one case, there was violence in the home. So that was, of course, very powerful. But I think overall, this is just a very small start when the institution itself has all of that happening, and that does happen in institutions. So.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. So I think something that I was just thinking of in terms of what we can close our conversation today with, because I think I can sit and listen to both of you and ask you 1,000 questions for hours, really. But I think a lot of the people who this conversation will reach. are people who are interested in restorative justice and processes. They're interested in, bridging this wall or this very strange gap that exists in the space wherein we theoretically understand children in conflict with law, we theoretically understand juvenile justice, we theoretically talk about gender-based harm for children or, against women. And how that works in the restorative processes, how that works on the ground, and how do you approach it, knowing fully well the intersections of all of these, like these very gray areas that you work with on a day-to-day basis. So I think what I the last question that I really have is, what would be that one thing, if there is just one thing, that you would want to kind of share as that being your takeaway personally from your experience with this intervention? Because I mean, I'm sure, like, like there's constant learning and unlearning with the work that both of you do, but specific to this intervention that you did, because like the 5 homes that you work with and the children within those homes and the facilitators that you trained, what has been that one takeaway that you would want to share with people who are interested in learning more about, what the project was, and just kind of what restorative processes look like for children in India? So yeah, open to whatever you want to share.
I'm thinking about the one takeaway sort of a thing. Something which Aarti was mentioning about the institutions, just taking forward that part, making sure that, yes, we did this on a smaller scale where we are providing that space for children. But I think holistically, what we would aim for uh, in the future is having those institutionalized, and not institutionalized would be the wrong word, I think, but perhaps have it in the institution where all of these processes involving more people, having more discussion, say with the staff, because again, with the staff, when we have worked with the or we would just hear from the staff, it's equally very challenging for them, because again, they have also never been given a space where they can talk about how difficult their work is, or what are the challenges they are facing. Are they getting equipped resources or not? How are they dealing with their self, because sometimes, which we are very cognizant of, something which Aarti has spoken about, when we sit in circles, is also how are we taking care of ourselves when the circles get heavy. So are we providing that space for these staff also to have or reflect those spaces? When we did circles for some of the staff in Delhi observation home, they really loved the space because they felt this is something for the first time, it's for them. They work so much for children, but for the first time somebody asked them, how are you all doing, what are your challenges? Just the fact that they were able to have the space to speak about those challenges, to speak about some of the impacts which they have had on children's lives, or the families, so taking it to a level where we are talking about a trauma informed approach throughout. We are talking about having very restorative conversations throughout, with the child. What are we doing for the rehabilitation? Are we talking to the parents? What are the circumstances, which the children are facing? How are the children going to be rehabilitated? What mechanism are we providing to the children to better equip them deal with the future? Again, all of this sounds very ambitious maybe, but these are something which is, but perhaps there in the, it's already there in the act. That's why, juvenile justice is very different in that perspective. It is a very rehabilitative act, right? So from that perspective, are we looking at those measures? Are we thinking about those processes? So for me, it's just a one step start, and then involving the larger people, because again, we can't just work with the child, and that's what has informed our work. We started working with the child, we started realizing, oh, we need to work with the family because of a lot of violence which the child has grown up in. So then started working with the families, and also then realizing, okay, gender-based harm is happening a lot of interpersonal violence which children are growing up with. So you expand, speaking to talking to the lawyers perhaps, and it keeps increasing. It's not a very set pattern, as I would say. It's something which, with conversations, all of these things inform how we design the process. And this is something which we'll constantly progress towards while moving in our work. And that's how it's going to flow, because it has come very organically. Our processes have evolved very organically from, say, circles to, oh, we need to have more conversation. Oh, let's I think just see value in those conversations, just the space which Aarti was talking about, just the one circle process, perhaps that has added a lot of value, so just seeing those also, and not always focusing on the end result so much, just focusing a lot on the journey as we are in that journey. So I think that is what is coming to my mind. Aarti?
Yeah, I just think that is so important. Like just working with children is I mean, of course, it has a lot of value, but it requires a much more holistic lens, including the fact that deprivation of liberty should be a last resort, which often it is not. And just being in an institution can cause a lot of harm. But for those who are in institutions, definitely agree with the need for just other interventions as well, and also for the staff, etc., everyone to be involved. I think my major takeaway was just that these processes can be very slow, and because it's a lot of self work, it's a lot of relationship building work, but just that there is a lot of beauty, even if there are no very tangible results, etc. I think there's just so much beauty in those spaces, and that is like a takeaway for me from most restorative spaces, particularly the Rajasthan pilots.
That's lovely. Thank you, both of you, because something that I was just kind of noting down thoughts that as I was listening to both of you. I think the takeaway that I feel just listening to the two of you and also having read the report. And understanding a little bit about the processes that we do, having participated myself within team circles also, is just kind of respect for the fact that when you're participating in any intervention, there's always to build trust wherever you go, and the fact that it is a process at the end of the day. And I think the biggest takeaway for me, just listening to your sort of takeaways, was really the fact that this is also a way to remind each person of the humanity of each human being. Because I mean, I think when we think about harm, there's always that crime and punishment mentality, right? That this is the victim and this is the accused, and you just then deal with them in that way and put them into separate boxes. But this, I feel like this process in itself and this intervention in itself has been designed as a way to remind each person, including the ones, the staff at institutions, that they are human beings as well. Because when a person is reminded of their humanity, they will automatically, it'll be a ripple effect, hopefully. So yeah, I mean, thank you for such a beautiful conversation. I can go on and on, but thank you so much for sharing. I will just stop recording now.
But before that, Shiranjan, thank you for your lovely questions. They were very, I think it made us think more on the process. It's very helpful to have that reflective space.
Super glad, super glad. Okay, I shall stop recording now.